Sorry, it's 9:30 everyone, good morning, and we'll start today's Cabinet meeting. Right, first item, apologies for absence.
None received.
And declarations of interest by councillors. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Item 11, Community Infrastructure Levy. I think I ought to declare at least a local non-pecuniary interest insofar as there is an application from Newton, which is shown on the schedule. The land at which the playing equipment that's being bid for will be placed is owned by Newton Green Trust, and I am a trustee of Newton Green Trust. So I think at the very least a local non-pecuniary. I don't know if there needs to be any more than that. No, okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, the next item is BCA 1940 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of February, which shows last month's meeting. So you've got the meeting minutes in front of you. I'll go on the page numbers as they're shown here. We've got page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and finally page 12. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes? Okay then, everyone happy to approve the minutes? All approve? Thank you. Right, the next item, and to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
And questions by councillors.
None received.
And matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There were none.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, forthcoming decisions list. You've all got the link to that. Have you had a chance to look through? Are there any comments on items coming up to Cabinet and Council over the next few months? Everyone happy with that? Yep. Councillor Busby.
An obvious decision is how long are we going to continue meeting in person, which is not on here.
I'll give you a COVID answer and then I'll look to the monitoring office to give a legal answer. So in terms of COVID, you would expect that we are regularly meeting in relation to that, eagerly awaiting the outcome of the COBRA meeting today. And yes, that will be something we will need to consider.
Thank you, Chair. Just from my perspective, obviously we would look to keep our regulatory functions going for as long as possible, but if there was any advice around not holding public meetings or not being able to access this building, for example, to hold meetings, we would either have to find alternative locations or cease meeting. But of course, in that situation, if there were any urgent decisions that needed to be taken, the Chief Executive does have emergency powers to take urgent decisions, which are then reported back to the full Council or to the appropriate decision-making body thereafter.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, sorry. So I don't know if you heard it, but would we legally be allowed to Skype from home collectively with the facility that the public could see, what was going on? And obviously, I don't know if there's a way of being able to react to what was being said. They wouldn't be able to speak anyway because the public don't. But would we legally be allowed to do that, or do the public have to be in the room?
So the first part of that around could all the members of the relevant committee or the Cabinet, for example, participate remotely, the answer is no. So there is no provision because of when the legislation was implemented. They obviously didn't think about virtual meetings at that stage. So for the purposes of actually convening a meeting, all the members have to be there in person. The meeting has to be held in public, but that doesn't necessarily mean that members of the public have to be in attendance. So actually screening a meeting, live streaming in the way that we do now satisfies that requirement of openness. So you would still be able to meet even if we couldn't allow members of the public into the building, but you would actually have to be here in person for the meeting to go ahead.
Anything else on...
Well, on that kind of
Okay.
thing, if we're going to look at reducing the number of meetings, and I think the meeting that we're going through today is very similar to the briefing session that we had, a week ago. We could almost ditch the briefing and go straight to the meeting and have any debate in that. It won't be quite so seamless, but at least it saves one meeting for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think that's something you want to think about outside the meeting, but certainly what I would say, and taking the lead from what the monitoring officer just said, your briefings can be done virtually. So that's no problem at all, because those are the briefing discussions between yourselves, and then you would only be coming together for meetings such as this.
Okay, so having got all that clarified, are we happy with the forthcoming decisions list as it stands? Thank you. Great. Moving on then, the next item is paper BCA 1941, the General Fund Financial Monitoring for 2019 to 2020, Quarter 3 monitoring. So I'm pleased to present report BCA 1941 to Cabinet, which is the General Fund Quarter 3 Financial Monitoring for the current year. The report covers the General Fund revenue budget and the General Fund capital programme and presents the latest assessment of how these compare with the budget for this year. Please note that the Quarter 2 monitoring papers were circulated but not debated by Cabinet due to the cancelled meeting in December. We now have 9 months data on which to base our extrapolation for the full year, and so we have much more certainty about the trends that the report shows. Although we have a long track record of historically delivering financial outcomes ahead of budget, these have been primarily driven by increased income, so we must never be complacent. We must always keep a tight watch and continually monitor our expenditure against budget. As before, we have adopted a tolerance level of 10% when identifying key variances of the full year forecast compared to budget. These are set out in Appendix A and with detailed narrative explanations provided in paragraph 5.7. We are now anticipating a surplus of £613,000 compared to budget. That figure, of course, is net of favourable and adverse variances in the many cost centres and income streams. So I will highlight the major variances. There's a £55,000 adverse variance for costs associated with the former headquarters site at Courts Lane due to delays in commencing work, and this is now expected to start in late spring or early summer. There is a £58,000 adverse variance for open spaces due to reduced Suffolk County Council contribution for grass cutting and repairs at Bellevue Park. There is a £29,000 adverse variance for expenditure on car parks, mainly due to business rates incurred. On the positive side, we are showing a £463,000 favourable variance for planning, primarily due to additional planning income, with some for professional charges and appeal costs. And we are also expecting a surplus licensing income of £43,000 and a surplus in SIL administration fee income of £22,000. And finally, we have some adjustments to our business rates collection, which we will fund through the established business rates equalisation reserve. This has worsened considerably since Quarter 1, primarily due to a significantly worse position for baseline business rates. The Section 31 grants and business rates pool have improved, however. And we know this is always difficult to budget for, which is why the reserve was established. And last year we transferred £1.846 million to that reserve. As stated in paragraph 5.8, we are likely to be able to make a significant contribution to reserves at year end. But it should be noted that the additional planning fee income is unlikely to be repeated next year. The position will be kept under review and final recommendations presented at outturn. Paragraph 5.13 of the report summarises the currently predicted movements in the Transformation Fund, with a forecast balance of £255,000 at the end of the year. At this stage, we're not showing any transfer of surplus to this, as it is likely, along with other reserve movements, to change. Our earmarked reserves were £9.6 million at April 2019 and are expected to reduce to £8.9 million at the end of this month. The transfers to and from these reserves are summarised in paragraph 5.15 with the detail in Appendix D. Our General Fund capital programme is detailed at Appendix E. That is currently forecasting a capital expenditure of £6.47 million, which means an underspend of £15.65 million. Both of these numbers are excluding SIFCO. The main points to note are provided in paragraph 5.19 and are the fact that we are expecting to reduce capital spend on mandatory disabled facilities grants by £776,000 due to a reduced spend of the annual budget. The recently approved increase in the grant threshold to £7,500 will help to improve this situation. We will carry forward £400,000 for grants for affordable housing, and we anticipate carrying forward £440,000 for the ongoing work at Kingfisher and Hadley Leisure Centres. And we are also anticipating carry forwards totaling £15.5 million, and these include SIFCO, for investment and commercial delivery. The details for this are given in paragraph 519D. All the detail on revenue variances can be found in Appendix A. Appendix B details our transformation fund. Appendix C shows how we are spending the business rates pilot. Appendix D sets out the general fund earmark reserves, including forecast transfers. And Appendix E contains all the detail on capital variances. Now finally, in my report to Council on next year's Treasury Management Strategy, I did say that following the Bank of England decision to hold interest rates at 0.75% in November, Arlene Close, our Treasury advisors, were forecasting that they would remain at this level for the foreseeable future. Well, here we are a couple of weeks later, and it goes to show that forecasting the future is fraught with difficulty, even for the experts. So before opening up for questions and debate on the report, I'd first like to move the recommendations in section 3 of the report on page 13, move that they be noted. And may I have a seconder for these recommendations, please? Councillor Malvisi, thank you. Members of the Cabinet, are there any questions on the Q3 monitoring? Councillor Busby.
Talking about planning and the favourable variance that we've got at the moment, you said that this was unlikely to be repeated next year. Do you anticipate that planning volumes are likely to be less, or?
No, I think, and probably Ms. will corroborate this, that the fee level for next year has been estimated based on the current work and predicted workload. It's just that in this current year there was considerably extra that came in that wasn't anticipated at the time the budget was set last year. Melissa, is that?
Yeah, I think.
So what increased the budget?
We have increased the budget.
Okay.
Anyone else? Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I've just got a question on base rate and the implications for us, because of course at different times and for different reasons we're both borrowing and lending money. Some of the money that we borrow is sort of fixed term borrowing. I just wondered what the implication was for us, if there was a sort of an easy explanation, what the implication is for us for the reduction in base rate.
Melissa, would you?
Yeah, so a lot of the borrowing that we do for Babergh is short-term borrowing from other local authorities, so we expect that to drop with the interest rate as well. Currently we're borrowing about 0.7%, so we expect that to reduce, so there will be a benefit to our short-term borrowing. That's the short answer.
But I'm right in assuming that the Public Works Loan Board borrowing is not going to be, because we borrow at the time, the interest rates are set at the time we borrow from PWLB, so the existing borrowing won't be impacted.
Yeah. Come on. So for Babergh, we haven't actually locked into any PWLB borrowing for SIFCO or anything at the moment, but obviously we're keeping a close eye on that because that does track the markets as well and the rates as well. So if that does take a dip, we will take a look at, but we can't borrow in advance of our needs. So if we don't need to borrow, we're not allowed to, so we certainly wouldn't do that.
Before I go to Councillor McCraw, if there are any other questions from members of the Cabinet? Councillor Busby.
Obviously, the coronavirus is going to have an impact on the way they operate. I don't think it's going to impact perhaps this year. We've got one more quarter to report on. But obviously for next, it's obviously too early to try and work out what kind of impact it's going to have on the numbers. Are we anticipating doing a coronavirus budget or revised budget?
We've already set and approved the budget for 2020 to 2021. I think the best we can do is to track in the monitoring in each quarter. That's a fair comment, isn't it?
That's fine, monitoring after the event. I'm thinking, is there anything that we can do to overcome any potential increase in costs that we're likely to have? What can we predict in advance to minimise the effect of this? It's all we don't want to just get to the end of the year and say, oh, £500,000 overspent because of this, and we couldn't do anything about it, couldn't we?
It's going to be very difficult to predict how it would impact our budget at all. I mean, we know what the government has done in terms of business rates relief and in terms of statutory sick pay, which is going to help individuals in terms of their council tax payments. But I'm not sure that there's nothing else that... Sorry, Cass.
Hello, thank you, Chair. So just to come in on that, what we are looking at planning for is a loss of staff. So what that might do to the budget is have an impact on loss of income. So if we've got building control, food safety officers, licensing officers, that kind of thing that have an income generation within their team, it could have an impact on that. So what we'll do as part of our business continuity is when we're planning for loss of staff, we can start mapping what that might do to income. It won't necessarily give us a journey to get that income back within the year, because surveyors aren't going out to survey houses and sign off building works. The builders aren't going to be out there doing the work either. So there will be a drop across the whole sector for that kind of thing. But we will be, as Chair has already said, be putting that into our budget paper to show what that was. So we might be able to map it to have an expectation of what that impact would be. There isn't necessarily a route to generate that income back again, I guess.
Thanks, guys. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up in any other business, but I think this is a natural time to include this. At SRP last night, I asked about... obviously, business rates are being held by the government, but in terms of council tax being paid, and of course, not just our staff, but a lot of staff could find themselves in a very difficult situation. Now, we do have provision within the rules that we have already about people, hardship funds and people being able to take a break if they notify us. But do you think it's worthwhile that this Cabinet asks how we can move forward? So if something... if it got really bad later on, I'm talking about particularly council tax, but it could extend out, a paper on the effect, the possible effect, and what we can do to react in a certain situation. Because I think we need to be ready if in 2-3 months' time, if coronavirus really bites in terms of people, especially the self-employed, who are not able to pay their council tax, and rather than ending up with a criminal record, because we take them to court very quickly, that there is some sort of leeway, and I think that would help us reputationally as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly, we are looking generally in terms of assisting people in difficulties with council tax, which is why we've approved the Citizens Advice Protocol last month. So that in itself should help in terms of working with individuals that do find themselves in difficulty. But I take your point that there's probably other things we can do. Cass, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so just last night, actually, there was some information posted on self-employment around coronavirus and what people can do. So the Employment and Support Allowance, ESA, can be claimed from day one of illness rather than day 8 for those who are self-employed and don't have statutory sick pay. So that is obviously quite new news, and there's no massive detail around that, but I would expect more detail to come out about that. So absolutely, I think we should be signposting those who are self-employed or don't have access to sick pay to the ESA government benefit.
Councillor Osborne. Thanks, Cass.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. As Councillor Davis has just alluded to, we did discuss it at the Shared Revenue Partnership meeting yesterday, and I think what we agreed on was that some guidance be put to the officers within that partnership, so that if and when it does hit hard, they've got guidance, so that they've got clear lines on what they do and how they go about it, rather than them feeling in the dark. And also there's the issue that if at any time a lot of the officers are off from the Shared Revenue Partnership and we have to put other staff in there to manage the situation, then they've got clear guidelines on what they can do when it does start to hit hard. And I think that's the approach that we were coming from the Shared Revenue Partnership point of view, so that we're prepared for it, basically.
Okay, and understand that, and we will look to see what we can do in that respect. Okay, Councillor McCraw, do you have a question?
A question, a bit of an observation. It was just a thought that when interest rates are 0.5% or 0.25% or 0.75%, it seems that the difference between those is actually relatively low. I mean, they're low interest rates, whatever you call them. Anything below 1% is low. So there's going to be changes at the margin. We'll gain some swings and roundabouts effects either way. However, the effect of the interest rates in terms of the council's financials is, I think, probably the least of the financial effects that the council might face through COVID-19. So worrying about interest rates is a little bit like sort of worrying about the straw when you've got a dirty great brick wall coming up to you. Well, it's just, it's a different scale. So I don't think we should get overly obsessed about interest rates.
Thank you. Thanks. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on the Q3 position? From my point of view, I think that the surplus is good. It's to be welcome, and obviously it's an improvement on the original budget, a significant improvement, which is going to help us. But apart from that, the position is looking quite good, I would say. Anyone got any further comments? If not, we'll take it to the vote.
One other thing to say is that it's a remarkable thing if you can get a department that A, brings in a huge positive variance and wins award for its IT enhancements. Because the two don't normally go hand in hand.
No, yes, the planning department is doing very well at the moment, and making money and being innovative, and we're seeing housing applications approved and housing being delivered. So all in all, a very good success story. Thank you. Right, so we've got the recommendations in paragraph 3 proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Right, moving on then. The next is paper BCA 1942, the Housing Revenue Account Financial Monitoring for 2019-2020, Q3. So I'm pleased now to introduce report BCA 1942 to Cabinet, which is the Housing Revenue Account Q3 Financial Monitoring for this year. The report covers the HRA revenue budget and the HRA capital programme. And this report, like the General Fund report, extrapolates a forecasted outcome for the full year based on actual data for the first 9 months of the financial year. The original budget for 2019 to 2020 showed a deficit of £193,000, which would be balanced by withdrawing monies from reserves. However, we will need to use more reserves as we are now forecasting a deficit of £513,000, which is an adverse variance of £320,000 against the budget and a worsening since Q2. A summary of the variances is provided in paragraph 5.6 of the report, and full details can be found in paragraph 5.7. The deficit should, however, be seen in the context of our healthy reserves, which will still be in excess of £12 million, even allowing for that deficit, and as described in paragraph 5.7. And as always with the HRA, the short-term outlook should always be reviewed within the context of our 30-year HRA business plan. And I should say that also that the picture improves going forward once the government-imposed rent reductions cease in April 2020, and the effects of this are seen in the 2020 to 2021 budget that was approved last month, which shows a significant surplus of £334,000. Paragraph 5.6 in the report on page 31 clearly shows that the biggest drivers of the variance are a shortfall in rental income and an increase in the forecast for repairs and maintenance. We've got dwelling rental income at £115,000 below budget due to the timing of new build homes being completed. Non-dwelling income, which is primarily garage rental, is £52,000 below budget due to voids. Property services are showing an adverse variance of £101,000 due to an increase in repairs and upgrades to equipment in the whole house servicing contract, although this has improved since Q2, and also more to be spent on asbestos surveys. Repairs and maintenance are showing an adverse variance of £477,000, resulting from an overspend on external contractors due to the increase in responsive repairs to reduce the backlog of outstanding jobs. However, this is an improving trend, reducing from £668,000 in 2018-19 and £840,000 in 2017 to 2018. So that's just under £200,000 a year improvement over the past 2 years. Set against these is the underspend due to the slippage in the capital programme, which I'll move on to next. The HRA capital programme is set out in paragraphs 5.8 to 5.10 and also Appendix A. Planned maintenance capital spend is anticipated to remain at budget levels for the year as projects are completed later in the year relating to fire prevention and electrical standards. Likewise, our new build capital spend will be primarily in the last 9 months of the year as development programmes progress and new projects are identified. Again, we're not anticipating any underspend. Our capital expenditure to date is £7.76 million against a budget of £29.436 million. The full year spend is estimated to be £11.9 million, resulting in carry forwards of £17.5 million, primarily due to the new builds and acquisitions programme. The delays to the start of Angel Court and Courts Lane are the primary causes of this. So before opening up for questions on the report, I'd first like to remove the recommendations in section 3 of the report on page 31, that the shortfall of £320,000 be noted and that the capital programme be noted. And may I have a seconder for these recommendations, please? Councillor Osborne, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the HRA Q3 position? It is.
I will.
Councillor Busby, go on.
I can think of one, don't you worry. Property services planned maintenance. We're 10% over budget on planned maintenance. I can understand being over budget on responsive repairs and maintenance, but something where we've planned it in advance, it seems we should be spot on. As a second part to that, when do we review, or how often do we review what is planned? I mean, I've got to be in a bonnet about replacing roofs every 25 years, which has got to be expensive. And I live in a village that's about 40 years old, and I think there's been one roof replaced out of 500. So why are we doing them every 25 years? How often do we review that time frame?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Busby, for your question in relation to planned maintenance programme. I think it's fair to say that we've been in a transitional period because we haven't had the stock condition data. It's made it more difficult to plan long-term improvements to our homes. But as you'll be aware, we have employed 2 stock condition surveyors that have been actively visiting our properties and carrying out an assessment as to their condition to ensure that going forward we do have a funded planned maintenance programme that is scheduled in that way that you described. And I think we are seeing the fruits of that now. Some of the additional adverse variants are as a result of carrying out additional works, asbestos surveys being such an area, as well as other health and safety type work such as fire risk assessments and the alike. We have recently just been through a restructure of the team, and as a result we have employed an additional asbestos surveyor and fire risk surveyor that we expect to then reduce our dependency on external contractors to provide that work. So I foresee that we'll be making savings. We've also been in negotiations with some of our contractors, particularly around the whole house servicing contract, and as a result of those conversations we are changing the specification in, for example, the type of boiler that we install and the type of consumer unit that we install based on ensuring that we're compliant with regulations, but possibly not putting in the example that I'd use is consumer units. We've been putting in arc detection consumer units. It's a recommendation, but it's not a requirement. And as a result, we've made the decision in the past month to revert to an alternative that will save £136,000 next year based on this year's current spend. So we are doing lots of that work to look at the components, look at the type of components that we provide. We are looking at the life cycles of our components. We have traditionally over recent years pushed those out and extended them to make savings, but we are currently carrying out that review as well.
Thank you, Gavin. Just a quick question on the boilers. Are we ensuring that the boilers that we install now would be capable of burning hydrogen should the gas supply be changed?
That isn't something that we are doing at the moment, but we are actively in talks with our contractor, and we are looking at new technologies to look at beyond, obviously, the phasing out of gas. We are still installing gas boilers as we speak today, but we are actively looking at alternative solutions so that we minimise the long-term effects of gas boilers. The example that I use for gas boilers are we've talked to the suppliers, we've talked to the contractor. We can install a boiler that is as efficient as the boiler that we're installing currently, but save £100 on every boiler. When you're installing 500 boilers a year, that's a significant saving again.
Thank you. Councillor Arthey.
That's just a little bit more on the answer to Councillor Busby's question, really, because looking at the papers on page 33, you can see, I mean, all those mention of asbestos and all that sort of stuff, the biggest chunk is repairs and maintenance, and we're told the majority of that can be attributed to expenditure in relation to the use of subcontractors. So I'm presuming, although Gavin didn't sort of major on the use of subcontractors, I presume that this is responsible for the majority of the overall variance, isn't it?
Yes, Councillor Arthey, you are correct, and that's primarily because we've had a long-standing backlog of repairs since the inception of building services. I can report that in recent weeks we've reduced that work in progress from nearly 7,000 job tickets to 4,000 in just over 8 weeks. And I think that's really positive in terms of that means that customers are getting their jobs done and getting them done more efficiently and quickly. We are looking at the use of subcontractors, and we are attempting to reduce our reliance on subcontractors. Just to give you some examples of the interventions that we are currently working on, we're currently recruiting in that service to 2 carpenters, 1 labourer and 2 apprentices. They will be some replacements, but also utilising vacancies that we've had within the team. We're looking at our contractors. The example I would give is fencing, where we use a contractor to deliver lots of responsive repairs to fences. We're looking at capitalising some of that through new contracts that will be tendered for. We're reducing our demand in relation to void contractors and doing more of that in-house. We're also identifying those areas where we've traditionally used specialist contractors. The example I'd use is UPVC repairs to windows and doors, where in fact we're now looking at training internal staff, existing staff, to carry out those repairs, which again will reduce our cost on reliance of contractors. And we've also just recently restructured the team within building services in recent months as well.
Thank you, Gavin. Any other questions? Councillor Osborne.
On redoing that particular flat or house, is that more? Do you spend more money now than you have in the past? Is it another tranche of further investment?
So I wouldn't just talk about those tenants that sadly pass away. I'd talk possibly about the quality of properties being returned to us as and when they become void for a variety of reasons. And it has been the case that over the last probably 18 months, 2 years, we have identified and recognised that actually when properties are returned to us, we are having to invest more money in bringing them up to a lettable or an acceptable standard before we can relet those properties. Having identified that and identified it's a cost to repairs and maintenance, we have, through recent restructures, now have an officer in post who is visiting every person who's in bands A, B and C on our housing register. So we can assume that those people are likely to be the people that move in the near future. That officer is going out, surveying the property, talking to the tenant about the level of repairs that need to be undertaken to bring that standard up to an acceptable standard. And where we identify actually the level of repairs or the condition of the property means that we will sanction that tenant in a way in terms of reduce their preference or reduce their place in the housing register until they've brought the property up to standard. So I'd expect to see that is a long-term ambition. We've got one officer obviously visiting many people on the housing register, but over the short and medium term I would expect to see that reduce the costs as and when properties become void. Benefit is obviously less time to take as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Gavin. Okay then, if nobody has anything else they want to ask or discuss, then we've had the recommendations at section 3 proposed and seconded. May I take a vote, please? All those in favour? Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Moving on, the next item is paper BCA 1943, the Quarter 3 Performance Outcome Reporting, and I'll ask Councillor Parker to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present Cabinet with the third quarter performance outcome report. The Cabinet recommendation is to agree that the report and appendices adequately reflect the Council's performance for Quarter 3. Work is underway to review performance measures for communities to align with the community strategy. Other than that, Chair, I'd just like to thank the Assistant Directors and indeed the members for their continued support in reviewing the performance to ensure that the information captured therein is relevant to the Council's priorities and corporate outputs. Are we happy to take any questions?
Thank you, Councillor. We've got a good set of reports here now, and we'll wait to see when the communities starts reporting in a similar fashion, but they're looking good. Does anyone have any questions or any points they wish to make on any of these? Councillor Davis.
First of all, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Parker said. These really are improving time and time again, and I know Councillor Busby has his own opinion about how things are presented, but I think they're done in a very good way. I think there's a couple of points from the performance indicators that I'd like to highlight and compliment really, and maybe ask the question why. In particular, the sickness is down considerable, 600 days, less. So I think that's a real improvement. I know a lot of work has gone in by the various managers, because I know they won't all be work-related sickness, but I think there was a problem in the past, and I'm glad to see that is slowly but surely being addressed. So I think that's worth highlighting. And also, in terms of customer service, my own personal experience in Shotley continues to be positive. I have to say, Sarah, I think the team that go up there, the officers that go up there, they're incredibly enthusiastic. They're right out, and they're really helpful. And I think the numbers are creeping up in terms of people getting there and going there. And I know we want more people to go online all the time, but that the service that they offer those people that can't or don't quite understand the internet as well as some of us do is vital for them, and then they are taught how to access our system and go on. So I think those two particular things, and it's great to see the call times and everything else coming down. So congratulations to Councillor Parker and to Sarah and her team.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments from anyone? Councillor Busby.
I think the style's fantastic. Without taking too much away from what all the plaudits that you're getting, Mr. Parker, I notice there's been a decrease in the number of people streaming these meetings from 3,000 down to 1,200. Have you got a strategy for bringing the numbers back up?
Just really to make sure that you're in front of the camera more often, Councillor. There's some comments within the report that give some indication as to why viewings are going up and down. I suspect that they probably will increase over the period of time, and particularly, coming back to what we were talking about, the more meetings we stream, the more viewings there will be. That is the direction of travel. That's the way that things will be in the future, I'm quite sure. But difficult to explain little individual spikes.
Yeah, I think we'll hopefully Q3 was a dip because of the general election, and we'll see it pick up for Q4 and further increases next year as well. But we need to see a longer term trend before we can know whether it's going in the right direction or the wrong direction, and whether Q3 is, as it's suspected, an anomaly. Well, Emily, yeah.
Chair, in Q3 we did have the pre-election moratorium for the general election, so actually there were fewer meetings that were available to watch, so that would account for the reduced number of viewings.
Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss about any of the other performance measures? No? Okay, Councillor Parker, you've proposed this. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, the next item, paper BCA 1944, Community Infrastructure Levy, Still Expenditure Business Plan, March 2020. And may I ask Councillor Arthey to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you've got the report for the latest bid round. These come to you every 6 months with recommendations for your approval and noting of the delegated decisions. The report has a business plan, which is Appendix A at pages 109 to 129, and the technical assessments for the individual SIL bids, which you always have as well, which is Appendix B. That's pages 131 to 143. Also, we give you an update on progress on the previous bid rounds, and that's at pages 127 to 129. In your recommendations, there are 4 bids, 3 for your approval, decision today, and 1 for you to note as a delegated decision, which has already been taken. So the decisions for you today from the Local Infrastructure Fund are for East Bergholt. That's proposals for works to the Constable Memorial Hall, involving a new kitchen and access to the lounge. It's a collaborative SIL bid for £14,333 with a communities grant of £16,666, and the total cost of the works being £50,000. That's recommended for fund allocation from the Local Infrastructure Fund, totalling 14,333. I'm pleased to report there's another bid from Cockfield. They've been involved in most of the bid rounds. This one is a bid for a new adventure playground, a collaborative bid with the council being asked for £25,000 out of a project that costs £68,647, including VAT, and the parish council are funding the remainder through their own neighbourhood SIL and some precept and reserves and donations. So the recommendation for you this morning is that we approve £25,000 towards that project. Then we have bids from ring-fenced funds, and the first of those is in Lavenham. Again, I'm pleased to report that one. The bid is for a new car park, which is on land off Water Street. The land is being transferred to the parish from the current owner, which is National Grid Gas, I think they're called, for £1. There are other issues that will be addressed with regard to the gas holder on the site as well, which is a scheduled ancient monument. That's not part of this bid. This bid is for the car park. Again, it's a collaborative bid. The council is being asked for £190,000 out of a project that costs approximately £238,000. And the remaining monies are being provided by the parish council. Some of that is out of their neighbourhood SIL and some out of their precept. So the recommendation is for Cabinet to approve that bid for £190,000. And then lastly, we've got Capel St Mary, which is a bid for a new bus shelter in Thorney Road, originally submitted by Capel St Mary, but Suffolk County Council have now joined in the bid, so it's a joint bid. It's a 100% bid being undertaken under the SIL position statement for passenger transport improvements. The decision to approve this bid was taken under delegated powers on the 13th of Feb, so that's just for your noting. Finally, just to summarise the amount of spend, we've got a total expenditure in bid round 4 from the Local Infrastructure Fund of 39,333. Those are the ones in Cockfield and East Bergholt. And total expenditure for ring-fenced funds of £198,000. That's the £190,000 for Lavenham and the £8,000 for Capel St Mary. So the recommendations are set out in the report at paragraph 3.1. That's for East Bergholt, Cockfield and Lavenham. And to note the decision made at Capel. And at paragraph 3.2, you're asked to note and endorse the SIL business plan. I will just add, I know sometimes people ask questions about this sort of thing. Cockfield, of course, have benefited from several successful bids, starting with the very first bid round. I will just point out to you that so far development in Cockfield has resulted in £257,000 being collected in SIL. That's already being collected by us into the 123 fund. And Lavenham, I will just mention, already collected is some £80,000, but there is £357,000 due into our SIL 123 fund for that. I just mention that because in the past there has been comment from members that maybe we're allocating SIL funds to communities where no SIL is likely to be generated, or the levels of SIL likely to be generated are very, very low. So just to point out to you that the contribution to the 123 fund, if you like, from those villages that are benefiting has been quite considerable.
Thank you. Yes, I've noted that. I've got a quick question actually on the East Bergholt one. As a clarification, we've been asked to recommend the bid for £14,333, but in Appendix B, when looking through the technical assessment, the recommendation there is to approve the bid for £21,377.90.
Thank you. I shall immediately refer that to Christine Thurlow, who's sitting at the back.
Thank you. Yes, this bid has, we have been resolving how much money that we would ultimately pay towards this bid because of a community grant and because the amount of the estimates that were coming in were only resolved at the last minute. So I would have to say that the monetary figure in the technical assessment is incorrect and the one in your recommendation is correct.
Thank you. It's, Christine. The 14th, the problem in the technical assessment, it mentions both numbers, the 14,333 in one of the boxes in the table, and then the number I just quoted in the bullet point recommendation. So just wondering if there is some specific reason for that.
I just think in this particular bid round, we had two bids that were altering very much at the last minute. One was Lavenham, which almost didn't make it on the list, and one was the East Babergh proposal because of changes to estimates and funds. So I think the technical assessment was written before we actually settled on the final amount. So I would still direct you towards what we have in the SIL business plan and the recommendation in your cabinet report rather than the technical assessment.
Okay, thank you very much, Christine. Thanks. That's I think that's clarified that. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Councillor Arthey. He's informed us of those villages who have actually contributed SIL. Can he tell us what East Babergh has contributed in SIL? Sorry, can you not hear me?
I can, if you just give me a minute. All I will do is go on to the web pages and put in East Babergh. So if you just bear with me. It's a really good system, you can do it yourself. And the amount, okay. The amount collected for East Babergh for the SIL 123 list appears to be just under £39,000.
Thank you. It's actually more than I anticipated.
I think that's probably more. I think that's probably more than most of us anticipated, actually. But I take the point. I mean. Yeah, hopefully that number will increase quite considerably soon. Yeah. Does anyone else? Councillor Davis.
It's us, isn't it? Yeah. But I just would like to say for those that are watching live stream and those others, the Execom system is a brilliant system. And it is really easy to use to find out all that information. So just a plug for Execom there.
Thank you. Yes, it is a very good system and it's dead easy to interrogate and get this kind of information. It's just a matter of seconds, as Councillor Arthey has just proved there. Right, Councillor Busby.
Well, just to say that I don't think Clive should feel guilty about the Cockfield Infrastructure Levy Fund. Okay. Are you planning on winning Village of the Year again?
Councillor Holt.
Yeah, I just think it is a little disappointing that we don't get a more varied application from other parishes. I think it is up to us as members to ensure that we do pass that message down to all our parish councils that the pot is there and please, investigate projects and ask for help. I think there's still plenty of them that don't really understand it and don't really have the time to commit to putting a project forward, which I think comes down to us to ensure that we give our time to them and help them understand the SIL procedure.
Yes, that's very true. all members need to do that and work with their communities to take advantage of this, because the money is there and it's there to be spent for their benefit. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, Councillor Holt is absolutely 100% correct. And we as members, all the members, need to do a bit more. And to that end, our community grants review team are working towards putting together a programme for better information for members to understand how the grant system works, including SIL. So hopefully when those workshops come forward, that will help the members have a better understanding and be able to encourage them. And of course, hopefully, if Babergh were to adopt the locality awards, that will also help in the community engagement and moving forward on that as well.
Thank you. Right, so we've got the three items that we've got to approve. We've discussed a bit about East Bergholt and Copfield. Does anyone have any comments or anything they wish to say about Lavenham? It's a significant amount of money that they need, but we know that it's what it's there for, and I personally think it's a good use of SIL money. Lavenham is a very proactive village, and I'm happy to support that bid. But can I have any comments from anyone? Councillor Holt.
Just one point of clarification. From what I understand, you said the site is a complicated site due to its previous history. The money that we're putting in, is it solely for the car park provision, or is it to make the site safe, or is it to clean the site up? Is it environment? Is there anything that we're paying to help the environmental clean-up of it, or is it just to provide the car parking?
It is just to provide a car park, but it is slightly complicated by its former use as a gasworks, so the provision of the car park is a little bit more expensive than it would be if it hadn't got that history. But the other elements of what they're trying to do are not part of this bid. They're to do with the renovation of the gas holder, a display board so that it's a visitor attraction in its own right. It's a scheduled ancient monument. Those works are going to be principally funded by a grant from National Grid Gas, who have sold the site to the Parish Council for £1 and are also giving them a grant towards the future maintenance of the gas holder. So that's a separate project, not part of this bid. It's the car park and the electric vehicle charger points in that car park that form part of this bid.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Any other comments on the Lavenham bid? It's an excellent project for the parish and one that is very much needed. Councillor Malvisi.
How many electric charging points are being installed?
2.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, though, part of the sort of the idea behind what they're trying to provide is to actually get the power supply there so that the number of charger points can be increased at some time in the future. As you're probably aware, the provision of charger points is restricted by the supply. So the idea is to get a supply that's sufficient for more charger points in the future, should they be required, without actually putting in lots of charger points that at the moment may not be required.
This may be a flight of fancy, but is it possible that at some future date, probably not part of this SIL bid, that they could install battery storage there that could be topped up during the night from the supply and then used to augment the supply for charging during daytime?
No reason why they couldn't do that. I ought to point out, though, that this is Lavenham Parish Council's bid, not mine. So you're asking about all of the details, which I happen to know the answer to. Yes, I am Lavenham's member, yes. Okay, everyone. If there are no further questions or comments, then we've got these three bids to approve and the one to note. Councillor Arthey has proposed that. May I have a seconder? Councillor Busby. All those in favour? Thank you. Right, moving on to the last item, which is paper BCA 1945, the Joint Area Parking Management Plan. May I ask Councillor Malvisi to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to Cabinet the Joint Area Parking Management Plan, which Cabinet needs to approve in order for us to move forward with civil parking enforcement. Suffolk County Council adopted a high-level strategy in November 2018, and we have to have regard to that strategy and therefore produce our own, which is currently sitting as Appendix A. The Joint Area Parking Management Plan is a completely new policy document, and it sets out what we aim to achieve. It also does not set out parking restrictions in specific areas, nor is it a blueprint for paid parking. We are required to have a parking policy in order to implement CPE, which is due to start on the 6th of April. So I recommend this Joint Area Parking Management Plan for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I know that when this came to our previous meeting, we wanted to defer it because there was a number of questions that we had over CPE implementation, which I know members wanted clarification. And we have since had a further update on that in a briefing, so which I hope has clarified concerns, allayed some fears from members about how CPE is going to be implemented and whether we'll be ready for the 6th of April for being able to enforce in our district. So in the light of that, we're now in a position now to move forward with this plan. Does anyone have any questions on what we have now in front of us? Councillor Holt.
Yeah, most people know I'm not particularly happy with how this has been done, but I accept that we do need to get this passed. I'm still not content with the content of how, the application of how the parking is going to be enforced. And speaking to other members, I believe they haven't got a clue either, to be honest. They are anticipating things that I don't think are going to materialise, and I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. And I have stressed since we've had that briefing to all my parishes whom won't have a lot of regulation parking or yellow lines, but if they've got particular issues, they are to email me, and we have agreed previously that they can be forwarded to the correct people who will then hopefully get officers to visit. But I do stress that the information that's come through to members, all members, has been very limited, I believe, in the fine detail, and I think it is the fine detail of this that's the most important thing. Our constituents and members of the public and town councils and parish councils are expecting a lot, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think at the moment this is in place to deliver what they're expecting. It may be that we haven't managed their expectations, and if we haven't, that is down to us. I will support this, but as I say, I do have concerns about the actual content and how it's going to be applied.
Well, certainly in terms of the actual enforcement itself, we can only enforce where there are restrictions in place, double yellow lines. So where there are no double yellow lines, there won't be any enforcement.
But aware of that.
We do have, and we have been encouraged, and obviously you can get your residents via you to inform Suffolk County Council highways of where there are particular known problems, so that we can ensure that enforcement officers get out to those problems. I know Councillor Babergh wants to come back on that. But there is going to be a campaign of information, press releases, etc., in the run-up to April 6th. So hopefully there'll be more information that people will be able to have. But Councillor Malvisi, do you want to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. CPE is very different to the Joint Area Parking Plan. I'm abbreviating it. Yeah. Essentially, to engage in CPE, which was cascaded down by the Department of Transport, we have to follow through from what the county has set as an umbrella in their high-level strategy document. And as I said in my initial presentation, it does not set out parking restrictions or traffic regulations. It's not a blueprint for seeing where we can raise funds by charging for parking. It's not that. It's just a policy document that links in with the County Council's high-level strategy document, which links in to the Department of Transport's requirement to have these in place in order to move to civil parking enforcement.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'll start by thanking Councillor Mulvey, because I know the amount of work she's put into this with her team, but also the frustration she's suffered, if you like, dealing with the County Council and others. But I share Councillor Holt's concerns about this, because it does lack details. We don't know how many traffic enforcement officers will be coming to Babergh, where they'll be operating. I think, you know, it does lack details, and I understand, you know, we are part of the bigger picture, but I think for Babergh residents, you know, we need to understand more. And secondly, while I've got the floor, it was announced this morning that the government are looking to ban parking on pavements, you know, this half pavement. So how would that feed into this particular policy, or would that come under a different policy?
Councillor Movisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor. The news that parking on pavement may be banned will, I believe, fall under the CPE. I think it's just a tightening up of the legislation, probably. I'm sort of thinking here on my feet. Because if the curb is dropped, then you can go onto the pavement. If there is a curb and it's not dropped and you mount the pavement, then you're in soapy bubble water. And I think the government are looking at just clarifying and tightening up that area, because CPE will have probably caused some issues. It may be that now we're launching it into a rural area. These issues are coming to the fore more pertinently than they have done in the past. But we have been told, advised by West Suffolk, by Ipswich, the equipment's bought, the badges are on, the staff are employed, they've been trained, but CPE is not what I am asking you here today. CPE, I will talk with the Assistant Director, and maybe we can do a communication on CPE so that members fully are up to date as we are.
Thank you. Yeah, we must keep reinforcing the distinction between this parking plan and the implementation of CPE. I've got Councillor Osborne and then Councillor Holt again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I also share the concerns of my fellow councillors. I also understand that this isn't a blueprint and for civil parking enforcement, but I am concerned that I'm contacted on a regular basis about when civil parking enforcement does come into place, that various locations will have the ability to apply for residential parking permits. Now, I can't see that anywhere in this document. My concern is that when we go into the full civil parking enforcement, when it's implemented, and then we have some requests, or county have some requests coming forward, they say, well, hold on a moment, it's not in your parking plan, it's not outlined in there. So I want to be reassured that we will be able, our residents will be able to go through that process once civil parking enforcement is implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Just a point on parking permits. It may entitle you to park in the road, but it doesn't entitle you to park outside your house. Yes, but I will ask the Assistant Director to to elaborate on that.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, the remit for introducing those kind of permit schemes, resident parking permit schemes, will be with Suffolk County Council. What the area parking plan does allude to is that we will support communities where they are looking for new traffic regulations or permit parking schemes. So almost we're one of the stakeholders in that. So the County Council would look to us, just like they'd probably look to yourselves and local community groups or the town or parish councils, to ask you about your interpretation of whether that is a fit for purpose thing to do. So that's where the District Council would play a part in any kind of applications for resident parking schemes to Suffolk.
Thank you, Councillor Holt.
Yeah, again, I'm quite aware that the parking management plan is not CPE, but obviously it does lead us down the direction to deliver CPE. So, again, my concerns are noted. Pavements, as far as I'm aware, certainly told by Suffolk Constabulary that you can park on a pavement as long as you don't block the pavement. So don't expect that you can't park on a pavement. It's just as from my knowledge, if you block, so that a lady with or a person with a buggy or pushchair can't get through, then that is blocking a pavement. You can park on a pavement, but not block it. So I'm not quite sure how that legislation will come about.
The law's going to change to bring it in line with London.
That'll be interesting to see, because I think that will just lead to more chaos in our towns and villages. I don't think that's something that we really would welcome, to be honest. Blocking pavements is one thing, parking on pavements, I haven't a problem with it.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come in on that. As Councillor Malvisi said, the Department of Transport have just released a statement about this. And for me, I really welcome that, because it's this really grey area between what the police can still enforce and will still enforce, whether they can actually get out to it, and then what CPE covers. So what is happening is a consultation for a long-term solution around pavement parking will be coming out from central government. So as soon as that's available, I'll share that with councillors so that we can all feed into that together.
Thank you. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I think we've all got concerns about this, and we have had ever since we first saw it. But I think our concerns are more operational, and I don't think we ought to be getting wrapped up in those at the moment. You know, there will be operational issues that will crop up, develop as we're doing this. It's the principle that's important, and in terms of the principle, I think one of the things we've got to consider is that this has been the responsibility of the County Council. It will be our responsibility. Will that be better than it has been, or will it be worse? And I believe it will be much better. So in terms of the principle, I think we should support this.
Thank you. Councillor Holt.
I'm not sure it will be our responsibility, Clive. I'm not sure it will be our responsibility. It might be Ipswich Borough Councils and West Suffolk, so we might feed them the information that we want, but ultimately we're not policing it, we're guiding someone else to do that for us. And that's the key to the problems. I agree, that's for a later date, but that isn't necessarily our responsibility. I don't think it is.
Yeah, my point was, is it going to be an improvement or not? And I think it will be an improvement.
That remains to be seen.
I think we all do expect an improvement. After all, we've got pretty much a free-for-all at the moment, so anything is going to be an improvement on that. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Arthey, for being supportive. I represent Long Melford Ward, and I'm sure everybody has been through Long Melford, and it's a lovely village, and it has pavements which are totally flush with the road. So you do not mount anything to get onto the pavement, you just drive. It's just there. And you get people parking with their bumpers right up against the house or the business. So to hear that there's some clarity coming through is great news from the Department of Transport. But also, I think the civil parking enforcement is going to enable a light to be shone on the bad parkers in our communities, and hopefully through penalising them or counselling them to be better citizens will actually improve our environment and general well-being, because it is extremely frustrating in a village that has a main street that is 3 miles long with only one pelican crossing or one pedestrian crossing, when people from the nursing home have to walk a mile to it, cross, and then have to walk a mile back to get whatever it is they want, and then they have to repeat the exercise only to find that somebody has gone and parked on the pelican crossing itself. So I personally do look forward to CPE, but I do ask the members to support the joint area parking management plan, because that will lead to the CPE. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mavisi. Councillor McCraw, did you have a question?
This was really just a point. I think this is looking at the overview part of overview and scrutiny. And maybe Cassandra can advise me on this. It is Cassandra, isn't it? Yes, it's fine. When this came to scrutiny, CPE that is, we looked at the toolkit, which was the range of measures, the range of approaches that could be taken for actually applying CPE. Now, we weren't at the stage of applying CPE, we were just looking at the potential toolkit that would be available to us. The method of that application has now been decided, as far as I can see, that it will be a mixture of West Suffolk and Ipswich actually performing the enforcement. Now, as I see it, of taking an overview here, the Joint Area Parking Management Plan is the basis on which we want to choose the tools that we will employ. So what I'd like to ask is this, and I think it would answer the questions and concerns of various cabinet members and members in general, and I'd go further, the public in general, about the expectations, and it's about meeting those expectations. How are we going to instruct West Suffolk and Ipswich in what we want them to do, what specific measures we think should be enforced according to this Joint Area Parking Management Plan, because this is just the plan. So what are the tools we're going to ask them to do? What measures, what specifics, and what degree of expectation can the general public expect to see? Now, I have to say, looking at this, and this is a point where Mid-Suffolk and Babergh have taken a different view. The Mid-Suffolk Scrutiny Committee have taken the view that they want to scrutinise this Joint Area Parking Management Plan, and Adrian Osborne and myself did not feel that was necessary, simply because this is a policy document. There is nothing to scrutinise as such. This is the selection of the policies. The point at which of scrutiny would be when you've actually got something's happened, that CPE has been enforced, say, for a period of a year, and then you can go back and you can scrutinise whether it has been successful, whether the appropriate policies, whether the appropriate measures have been used, and do the policies and those measures need to be changed. That's a job for scrutiny, not before the event in this case. So if Cassandra could give us some indication as to how we move from a plan and the toolkit into the measures and the practical enforcement, I think that answers the questions. Am I correct?
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. So I'm sure people have heard me say this, and probably Councillor Mavisi a lot, but just bear with me. So if I could just very briefly talk about what is the District Council's responsibility and what is Suffolk County Council's responsibility, and that hopefully will feed into my answer around the policy application. So the District Council's responsibility is known as off-street, which is our own council-owned car parks. Suffolk County Council's responsibility, which is known as on-street, is the highway traffic regulation orders. So in this instance, Babergh and Mid-Suffolk have enforced their own off-street council car parks for quite some time, and the police have been responsible for enforcing the highway. Now, what CPE does is decriminalises it from a police responsibility over to a Suffolk County Council civil responsibility. So what Suffolk County Council have done, which most other county councils do across the UK, is devolve that responsibility to the district and borough councils, because they usually have some kind of parking enforcement teams already in place, and it's the same people that would do the enforcement on the highway. So for efficiencies, they put them as part of the same team. Now, a decision was taken back in 2017, I believe, for Ipswich and West Suffolk to undertake the enforcement on our behalf for our off-street. Suffolk County Council therefore followed that lead and agreed for those to undertake the enforcement for highways on street as well. So where does that play into these parking policies, I guess, is the end of that question. So we do not have the fundamental responsibility for parking policies on street. However, what we do have as a stakeholder, as a key stakeholder with the County Council, joining part of the Suffolk Parking Partnership, is how we can advise or push agendas around parking policies to Suffolk for the highway. So Suffolk Parking Partnership is being instigated as we speak. So I think you've met once. So this is a partnership that is has a political strand and an officer strand. So strategies across both on-street and off-street can be agreed. They should be supportive of what our parking plan already says, because we've aligned it with the Suffolk parking plan. And then at an officer level, we will be led by the political strand to make sure that those policies are adhered to practically and practically enforced out there on the highway. I don't know if that answers the question somewhat. So there is that balance between what we have responsibility for and what we can influence.
Councillor McCraw, you want to come back?
If I could follow on from that, then where does the feed in for specific proposals for parking areas on street? Where does that lie? Who has the responsibility, and what is the means of getting that translated into action?
So it is Suffolk County Council who has the responsibility for any new traffic regulation orders, or as Councillor Osborne mentioned earlier, around parking permits. So it would be for the community, normally a town or parish council, to look at where they feel that there is enforcement necessary that does not have a current traffic regulation order. That goes to Suffolk County Council. Now, Suffolk County Council will then instigate a consultation that would include ward councillors, portfolio holders, district councils and other relevant community groups, where they can talk to you to see whether you feel you would support that application. What I will say, because I know my county council colleagues say it, is that does take a long time. You're normally looking around 18 months to instigate a new traffic regulation order, and there is a cost to it that must be found from somewhere. So it is Suffolk County Council.
So to summarise, and please don't think I am taking any pleasure in this, but the parish, the community speak to the highways and the county, and then the counties consult us, and then we go to Ipswich and West Suffolk to carry out the enforcement. It's a very sinuous process, isn't it?
Well, it's not been any different from all you're doing is replacing Ipswich and West Suffolk from the police. I mean, the other part of the procedure's just the same. If I want to put double yellow lines on the A12 between Copdock and Capel, A, it would raise a lot of money, but B, I'd go through Copdock Parish Council.
All I was saying is I've got a feeling that CPE has raised people's expectations to perhaps ridiculous levels, and it's just a good point to make that perhaps it's not a universal panacea for all parking problems. It's in part, it seems to me, it's a deterrent, similar to speeding. You could get caught speeding, you could get caught parking badly.
It's not a deterrent to all parking problems, no, but It's there to enforce the regulations that are in place. If you need additional regulations, then you have to go through, as Cass has explained, the process for getting those additional regulations.
I meant it's a deterrent for breaking the law, or breaking something. You know.
Just because somebody parks on the side of a country lane, they're not going to end up getting a ticket. But clearly where there are double yellow lines, then that's where the enforcement can take place. And it is up to us to make sure that the CPM implementation officer is aware of particular hotspots. Obviously, they know about places like the centre of Sudbury, the centre of Hadley, but there are other places where there are regulations in place which are not necessarily on their radar, and it's up to us as the local members to bring it to their attention, as I have done regarding the road coming out of Dedham into Stratford St Mary, where there is now double yellow lines. They're in place. They were put down last year. They are ignored. So that is an area, that is a hotspot that they are going to have to focus on. And similarly, all of us need to identify similar hotspots in our wards where there are regulations in place which we know could do with enforcement. Make sure that the enforcement officers go there and sort out the problems. Thank you. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Councillor McGraw is correct. I think everybody's expectations of CPE are unrealistic. And it is, and we raised that with County at our last meeting, and it is hoped and planned that the PR message going out will help to reduce that expectation level and direct it to its realistic outcome. The abbreviated term for the civil enforcement officer is the CEO. So the CEOs will be visiting all locations. So Ipswich side will be visiting all the villages, etc., and into Hadley, and then West Suffolk coming up through the villages and into Sudbury. And yes, if you as a member have a specific problem in a specific village, then please, if it's West Suffolk side, please let me know. And even if it's Ipswich side, please let me know, and I will disseminate it to the necessary people, because they need to tour around the villages and the area to get a feel for what is where. Because they won't live in Kersey and they won't live in Lavenham. They'll live wherever in the county. Thank you.
Councillor Holt.
I can't stop speaking about this. I think, John, your earlier comment about you've notified them of certain hotspots, I think that's a privilege as cabinet members that we've had, because we have a briefing on it. But the problem I have is that all the other members haven't had that privilege. And it's the 12th of March and it comes live the 6th of April. Yeah. And we're talking about this now. That's the problem I have. I just think the engagement with members, town councils and parishes has been poor. And their expectations, Liz, are very high. And that's down to us for not managing it. And we haven't engaged enough and allowed them to understand how it's going to work. I mean, I was with Hadley members yesterday afternoon and Hadley Town Council, and their expectations are very high, but they haven't got a clue how it's going to be administered. That's Hadley Town Council, haven't got a clue. And I think that just highlights the problems that we've created for ourselves in managing it better. But I will fully support this.
Thank you, Councillor. It is a matter of making sure that our communications and publicity on this over the next 2 to 3 weeks is full and comprehensive and gets out to everybody. And I think that's certainly something we are planning to work on, isn't it, Cass? Yeah. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that as the portfolio holder, I've picked up the monkey. I will run with it, and I will ensure that the PR message now is going to be realistic and will achieve correct expectation levels.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we've had the recommendation proposed by Councillor Malvisi. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Busby. All those in favour? Thank you. Excellent. Right. That concludes today's meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for the 9th of April, 9:30 a.m. Thank you, everybody.